Second. Okay, Commissioner Purcell.
Here.
Commissioner Thaden.
Here.
Commissioner Ansari.
Here.
Commissioner Batts.
Here.
Commissioner Campbell.
Here.
Commissioner Coleman.
Here.
Commissioner Bowers. Okay, Commissioner Bowers, I know had to step away between the hours of 10:30, between 10:30 and 11:30. She might not be back yet. She did let me know that.
But we do have a quorum at this time, and so I think we can call the meeting to order, and I will ask Mr. Solomon to take us through the required state findings.
Okay, this meeting is being held virtually pursuant to Executive Order 16 issued by the Governor of Tennessee. The public has been invited to attend, and I believe will be participating in this meeting. The meeting is being recorded and will be available on YouTube for later viewing by the public. In addition, to conduct the meeting virtually, we will need a motion that the board believes it is necessary to conduct this meeting to take up essential MDHA business, and all of our votes will be done by roll call at this meeting.
So moved.
Motion's made. Is there a second?
Second.
Properly seconded. Would you call the roll, Mr. Solomon?
Commissioner Purcell.
Yes.
Commissioner Thaden.
Yes.
Commissioner Ansari.
Yes.
Commissioner Batts.
Yes.
Commissioner Campbell.
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman.
Yes.
And just checking to see if Commissioner Bowers has arrived yet. Commissioner Bowers? Not yet. Okay. The motion passes.
All right, this is the approval of the minutes. I'd like to, on the minutes, on page 2, was Arlene Cummings able to join us for the last meeting? I believe that Arlene Cummings was not able to join us, and I'd ask the minutes be amended to delete her introduction, if that's true. Mr. Harbison, am I right about that?
I believe that, yes, that's correct.
All right, so that's one change on the, and this is, the pages are not numbered, but what is 1, 2, 3, 4, on the 5th page in the 6th paragraph, Dexter Samuels is not currently a member of the Metropolitan National Airport Authority Board. Instead, he is a vice president at Meharry Medical College. I'd ask that change to be made without objection. And with those two changes, are there any other changes to the minutes? All right, is there a motion to approve?
So moved as amended.
Motion's made. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Oh, do we need a roll call for this as well, Saul? I guess we do. Saul?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, we do. Commissioner Purcell.
Yes.
Commissioner Thaden.
Yes.
Commissioner Ansari.
Yes.
Commissioner Batts.
Yes.
Commissioner Campbell.
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman.
Yes.
Commissioner Bowers. Okay.
All right, I believe we're now to introductions, and I believe, Jim, that we have the opportunity to hear from the two of our leaders at Hadley Park Towers.
We do, and if they could please continue. Hadley Park, of course, is one of our tower sites, one we're quite proud of. So if they could proceed, that'd be great.
I believe we have Ms. Joyce Campbell and also Ms. Tawana Jones.
Good morning. Yes, sir. Tawana Jones speaking, and Ms. Joyce Campbell.
We're delighted to have you here. Please tell us what you think we need to know.
Well, the pandemic has really been hard on everyone as far as our residents. But we're hoping that, we can get back in order and move forward and do more for the residents, interact more once this pandemic is over. But all we're doing is pushing to try to make it better operation, and making it outstanding for our residents.
Ms. Jones, how long have you been the property manager there?
I've been a property manager here for a year.
Well, congratulations on the year.
Thank you.
How long have you been with MDHA?
I've been with MDHA a year as well, but I previously was in housing for like 20 years, and I relocated to Tennessee.
Well, we're delighted you're here and that you have Ms. Campbell with you, the president of the Hadley Park Towers Resident Association.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
The association officer has maintained the communication through this pandemic, and we appreciate the effort of our property manager and enjoy working with her. Hadley Park has been on site twice for COVID-19 testing, and we appreciate the convenience of having testing on site. We have worked with MDHA social worker, and meals have been provided for the residents here at Hadley Park Tower. We're looking forward for the pandemic being over so that we can start back using our community room and providing service to our community. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Campbell. We join in your prayer for not just your community, but all of our communities to have this behind us. Are there any questions from the board for either Ms. Campbell or Ms. Jones?
No, sir.
Any board member has a question? Well, I was over in the Hadley Park Community Center just very recently, and I was again impressed at how well all fits together there and works together there. And I know it'll be a special opportunity when you can appreciate all of the resources that are available within the neighborhood. So thank you both for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're on agenda item number 4, which is public comments. There are on this agenda 2 different public comment sections. One is specifically directed to the 5 Points Redevelopment District and will come during the report of the Joint Development and Finance Committees. Are there any other public comments? Ms. Berry.
There are not any other public comments for this period.
We will close this portion of the public comments then, and then move to reports from committees. Report from the Joint Development and Finance Committees. Commissioners Thaden and Ansari.
Thank you. Yes, so the committee met on September 3rd, where we had the agenda item of the Briarville pilot agreement. And so this included 2 and 3 bedrooms at or below 60% of the area median income. And the committee recommended approval to the full board for that pilot agreement. And so I would make that motion now.
Is there a second?
Second.
Properly seconded. Is there any discussion?
Just real quick, just want to make sure. I think we said we met on the. I think it was. Was it the 24th when we met, not the 3rd? Or am I mistaken?
Actually, I believe that this pilot agreement came to us at the September 3rd meeting.
Sure. Okay. All right.
Any other questions or comments? Are you ready to vote? Mr. Solomon.
Chair Purcell.
Aye.
Commissioner Thaden.
Aye.
Commissioner Ansari.
Aye.
Commissioner Batts. Commissioner Batts.
Can you hear me? Aye.
Commissioner Campbell.
Aye.
Commissioner Coleman. Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Okay, Commissioner Bowers, don't believe she's on yet. Okay. The roll call is completed and it's 6 yes, 0 no.
And you adopt Driver Safety Match Grant Program.
Yes, so at the same meeting on the 3rd, it was presented to us that the driver safety match program, and the committee recommended approval of that, allowing the executive director to apply and implement the driver safety matching grant program. And with that, I move that to the full board now.
There's a second. Commissioner Ansari, seconds.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, Mr. Solomon, call the roll.
Chair Purcell,
Aye.
Commissioner Thaden,
Aye.
Commissioner Ansari,
Aye.
Commissioner Batts, Commissioner Campbell,
Aye.
Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
6-4-0 against.
And you adopt. Now, item C, options for 5 Points Redevelopment District, Chair Thaden.
So we had a joint finance and development committee meeting on October 8th, and we were very grateful to have council member Brett Withers join us at that meeting and come to discuss the various options for the 5 Points Redevelopment District as that is planned to expire at year end. And so during that presentation and with lots of information that was given, the committee recommended that we actually consider all of the options at this full board meeting and elicit public comments on those options today. And so that was moved at the committee meeting, and I would move the same recommendation so that we could do that public comment now.
All right. You've heard the motion. Is there a second? Mr. Ansari, seconds. Any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, Mr. Solomon, call the roll.
Chair Purcell,
Aye.
Commissioner Thaden,
Aye.
Commissioner Ansari,
Sorry. Aye.
Commissioner Batts. Commissioner Batts. Circle back. Commissioner Campbell.
Aye. And it was me that did the second, not, I'm sorry.
What was that? Oh, you did the second. Okay, very good. Commissioner Campbell.
Thank you.
Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Commissioner Batts.
Aye.
Okay, Commissioner Bowers. Still not here. Okay, 6-4-0 against.
And you adopt. We are now prepared then for the staff presentation of the options that will be followed by public comment and any action the board may choose to take.
So this is Jim. Joe will cover it in detail if required. We also have Mr. Jim Murphy, who's sort of the expert legally in redevelopment districts. Just a quick summary of the three choices that we provided you should have had in your board packets. One is to allow the plan to expire as scheduled. The second would be extending the district for a period of time. We recommend up to 5 years or any point in between there that the board would choose. And a third option would be extending the district for a time frame that coincides with the rezoning proposal now pending at Metro Planning and sponsored by the council member of record, with a simultaneous time frame not to exceed a year, and whichever one of those two was earlier would be adopted. And we have draft resolutions can provide to impact that if that's what the board wants. So those are the three choices. Let it expire, put a clock on it, make it contingent on the rezoning with a shorter clock, and the earlier of the two would be the one that would govern. And with that, unless Joe has other details on that, that's pretty much what we've come up with since Thursday. Joe?
Thank you. That is, that's pretty much the scenario. We heard a lot about it at the development committee. The plan is scheduled to expire on December 31st. Councilman Weathers has introduced to the Planning Commission a rezoning as part of his process to try and preserve some of the aspects of the 5 points plan. We do have the option, MDHA, to approve the 5 points plan. An amendment to that, it would require the board's approval and subsequent Metro Council approval. There is a schedule on the board item that talks about that. We can make these meetings and provide the adequate public notice for the public hearing that would be held on December 1st at the board, at the Metro Council. And then likewise on the final reading on December 15th. So it would be in effect before the extension would be in effect before its expiration. It does require Metro Council's approval. Just the board acting will not extend the redevelopment district. It does require Metro Council's approval to do that. So that is all I wanted to add. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
I just add one data point. We do need the board to give us guidance today on what your desires are. So we'd have to take a board to pass a resolution today for us to make the timeline Joe described. And we have had it legally reviewed by both Will Chopin and our in-house counsel and Mr. Jim Murphy, who's available to give comments on it should the board desire. So those are the three options in the staff assessment.
Thank you, Mr. Harbison. And it is a great pleasure and a joy to see Mr. Murphy, who has the best background of anyone on the call. There are a number of people who don't have their video on who may have better backgrounds, but of the people on the call, Mr. Murphy, you are living right. And I'm very, very thankful that you've joined us. It looks like a comfortable place to be away from the office.
Sure.
So let me ask one question. It was subject to Mr. Murphy's additional, if other words are needed. Mr. Kane, I think at this point, based upon where you were at the end of the last meeting, you indicated to the council member that you had not actually, as a staff, gone and looked at the 5 Points redevelopment district with an eye toward extension, and it may very well be at this point, or you may want to defer until after we've heard public comment. But if the staff has an opinion as to whether or not a resolution to extend would be legally acceptable from the staff's perspective, I think, Mr. Murphy, we should hear that now.
We did go out to and review the area. There are only a handful of properties located inside the redevelopment district themselves that has substantial damage that had not taken repairs, that had not taken place yet. What we saw on the ground was approximately about 25 parcels of land that were in need of renovations, and would certainly, it may even be questionable as to whether they are even can be occupied at this point in time. The legal question, I would refer back to Jim Murphy or to Will Chopin to answer on that as to whether we can move forward with that information.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll try to, when we've looked at this question in the past, there's not a requirement under the state statute that you determine that the area is still blighted in order to do an extension. There is a state statute requirement that if you extend the duration of the tax increment financing provisions beyond 30 years, you have to get approval from the commissioner of ECD and the comptroller. But as I understand what is being proposed here, there would not be an extension of the tax increment deadline. That would go ahead and expire at the end of the year. And so just extending the duration of the plan would not trigger the state approval requirement. As Mr. Harbison described, you would need to get approval from this board and then the council for an extension. So it becomes basically a judgment call on the part of the board as to whether an extension of, up to however many years you decide is needed in order to continue to see the redevelopment plan that was originally adopted 30 years ago actually achieves completion.
Well, thank you, Mr. Murphy. I think that's very helpful, and it adds considerably to the knowledge of this board as we move forward. Is the council member on the call? Unless there's any question, by the way, from a commissioner at this point, I'm prepared to move into public comment if you're comfortable with that. All right, it appears that you are. Is Councilman Withers on the call?
Yes, but we have other people, Chairman, that have dialed in for public comment. We'd anticipate that perhaps you would be here. So I've got a list of people that Jamie's recommended I call in sequence that have been told they would be in this sequence, I believe. Would that be okay if we pursue and go with the public comments?
No, that's fine. That's new to me, and I'm glad to know it. And then you're suggesting that the council member would then follow their comments?
Yes, sir.
All right. Unless the council member, is that him sitting there next to you? I'm sorry, I didn't. That's a different mask, Fred, and I'm glad to see you. The distinguished council member from the 6th District is a small figure on the right-hand side of your screen with his mask on, and he is my council member, and I'm very thankful that he is there. He was so distant and masked that I didn't recognize him. Did you want to say anything now, Councilman, or would you like to wait?
Thank you so much, Mayor Purcell. I will wait to listen to the public comment.
Good. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you. I apologize. I don't know how I overlooked my council member. Please, go ahead.
Chair, would you like to just make sure we set the ground rules on how long each speaker has for the public comment period? Usually we do 3 minutes a person is what the norm is at MDHA. It's not cast in stone. So it's, I think Jamie though did communicate 3 minutes to everybody, but I'm not sure about that.
How many people are on the list, Jim?
Right now, 3.
No, 4.
We have a 4th just dialed in, so 4.
But maybe okay.
Unless there's objection from the board, I think 3 minutes, which is our standard amount, would be sufficient. And if we have other questions or needs, we can follow up from there. We have about 30 minutes for the rest of the meeting. Go ahead.
And we had indication it could be up to 8, Board Chair, but right now there are 4 called in. So for the first public comments, I'd ask Mr. Rich McCoy. Can you unmute him? You're unmuted, sir, and you have 3 minutes.
All right. Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank the board and the executive committee for allowing us public comments during this time from individual neighbors and discussion of this 5 Points overlay sunset date. I am Rich McCoy. I've been a resident of East End for the past 25 years. I'm the former neighborhood association president and currently sit on the board of that same neighborhood association. I've also been involved in the KC revision as an observer. I would like to start by saying I do support the letter and the request that was submitted to MDHA from all 3 of the neighborhoods, Historic Edgefield, Historic East End, and Lockland Springs, to extend the sunset deadline for the 5 Points redevelopment overlay. I think as Commissioner Purcell noted in the subcommittee meeting last week, it's very rare that you see all 3 neighborhoods agree on something and move forward with it. This request was made collectively by the neighborhoods for 2 different reasons. The most obvious was because of the clear damage we endured by the redevelopment district from the tornado in March of this year. And second, because this request goes beyond current politics and has bridged the leadership of these neighborhoods over the last 20 years. The neighborhoods felt like MDHA needed to hear directly from the neighbors affected. The request from our viewpoint is pretty simple. It's to keep everything in place, the guidelines for a maximum of up to 5 years or until some mechanisms can be put in place through the help of our councilperson and other metro departments to help assure the neighborhood that the inevitable redevelopment of these damaged and destroyed properties within the district and blocks are completed as were envisioned originally through the guidelines. And we are requesting no additional TIF money, which I believe was noted earlier. I have to say I was a little surprised, and I was glad to hear Joe say that they had been back out to assess the damage. I was surprised that during that subcommittee last week that MDHA had not visited or taken account of the damage in one of its own redevelopment districts following a natural disaster. I bring this up because the last major change that was made to these design guidelines for 5 Points and East Bank was a direct response to the tornado in 1998. In addition to the city and FEMA being involved in this recovery, a call for national design and planning officials through the local and state chapters of the American Institute of Architects were brought in to help plan and stabilize the recovery effort for this area. The branch of AIA's effort is called RUDAT, or also known as Regional Urban Design Assistance Team, which includes hundreds of design, development, real estate, economic professionals that descended on East Nashville for a week in July 1999, along with all the neighborhood and community stakeholders a room could hold to discuss and how to better build back our neighborhoods and communities following this natural disaster. The document that was
That's 3 minutes, Chair.
Oh, wow. Okay. Sorry.
Thank
Can
you,
I
Mr.
sum it
McCoy.
up quickly? Okay. Thank you.
You did very well. Thank you. That's a good model for
Okay,
everyone. 3 minutes goes quicker than you think.
So next I'd ask Mr. Manley Seal. Unmute him, please, Rob. 3 minutes. Yes.
Hey there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yes, my name is Manley Seal. I am also a licensed architect and partner at Powell Architecture and Building Studio, located in East Nashville. We have a lot of projects that are either currently in the works or have already been completed in this district. And I just want to thank also the board for allowing us to speak. And I want to thank the efforts of the committee for all the years of service that they've put in for overseeing this plan. I do believe that the plan, though, has done the job it was created to do, and that is to help revitalize and redevelop an area that have fallen into a blighted condition with mostly automobile and storage uses. That work, in my opinion, has been done, and the area has developed in such a way now that those uses would not naturally see this area as a compatible use for them. It would not make any economic sense to develop a car lot or auto repair shop in this area because of all the development efforts that the plan has already helped put in place. So therefore, I believe that the plan has served its purpose, and we need to relieve MDHA of the burden of continuing this overlay, especially while there is also a historic overlay in place that will protect the residents that live in the area and also protect the character of the neighborhood. So there's already another overlay in place that I think has a lot of the same design considerations that the 5 Points plan has. And I also support the councilman's efforts and what he is doing now. So that's all I have to say. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Seal. Next call.
Next to the call is Mr. Taylor Perkins. Unmute him, please. Sir, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you for your time. I want to thank the board and I want to thank the committee for overseeing this plan as well. I appreciate all y'all's time and efforts into this. I'll be brief. I just want to support Councilmember Withers' guidance on this and support my opposition of extending this plan. I do believe, as a resident of this community and a resident of this neighborhood, that it's not in the best interest of us moving forward. And as was stated by Mr. Seal, we have a plan in place with the historic overlay that protects the neighborhoods. And that I think is sufficient for what we are needing to continue to see our already blighted community continue to repair itself from the tornado and to continue to grow as it has been. That's all I've got, guys. I appreciate y'all's time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Perkins. I think it might be useful, like the Metro Council and other meetings, could you identify where you live? Do you mind?
Yes, I live on 4th and 16th Street.
In Lachlan Springs.
Yes, sir.
Next caller. Thank you.
Next is Mr. Mark McGinley. Unmute him, please. Sir, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Mark McGinley. I live at 1140 Brookmead Drive. I'm one of the owners of the 1012 Main Street parcel, which we're currently developing. I wanted to call in to support Councilman Withers in his efforts to rezone the district and to oppose the extension of the MDHA overlay. I think it's important to note, and I'm sure you're all aware of this, but that the historic overlay in place that would remain covers virtually every single parcel within this MDHA overlay. The historic overlay also limits heights to 3 stories regardless of sub-district, so any concerns about any additional height that may be granted by the proposed new zoning districts is, I think, effectively mitigated. I really think that Councilman Withers has done a great job putting together a very thoughtful proposal to replace this overlay with the comprehensive rezoning, using what I think are the closest analogous zoning districts to what are the existing zoning districts. I think one of the best things about his plan is that it will really eliminate a significant amount of confusion regarding the intersecting zoning rights and restrictions contained in the 5 points MDHA overlay, the base zoning districts, and the historic overlay. I'm a land use attorney by trade, and even, I consider myself relatively fluent in these things, and even for me, the intersection of these documents is very confusing. So I think taking one of these overlays off will help people understand just exactly what it is that they have and what they can do with their land. Lastly, I'll say that I think the MDHA overlay here has served its purpose. There's no blight in need of remedy in 5 points. And that, instead of asking for this overlay to be renewed, I think what we should be doing is congratulating the MDHA for mission accomplished. And I think that we should be very grateful for Councilman Withers and his thoughtful work in putting together this rezoning plan to fill any potential zoning regulatory loopholes from the outgoing overlay. So I would support him and ask that you allow this overlay to expire per its course. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGinley. Next call.
Next call is Ms. Carol Norton, so please unmute her. And ma'am, you've got 3 minutes.
An old time, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm an old time resident of East Nashville and Edgefield on Boscobel Street and participated in the original 5 Points development plan and its update. I would suggest to the board that they continue the development district for an additional 5 years in order for it to coincide with the East Bank. All you have to do is to stand at 10th and Woodland, as a neighbor said, and do a 360 and see that there was extensive damage done by the tornado in March. Contrary to what some of the callers have said, all of the parcels are not protected by historic zoning. In fact, Edgefield is the only one with historic zoning. Laughlin East End has conservation historic zoning, and there's a difference. In order for there not to be gaps, I think it should be continued. I applaud Councilman Withers for having started developing a plan, but there is no guarantee that it will be in place by the end of the year. If this redevelopment district expires on December 31st, before a new plan is in place, there will be a gap and all manner of horrors can occur. I would again respectfully request that you extend for 5 years the existing 5 Points redevelopment district so that it can conclude along with Main Street in the East Bank district. That's about it. Good luck to all of you, and I appreciate your listening to the comments. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Norton, and we thank you for the work you've done with Envision Casey over the years. Next caller.
Chair, that's the end of our callers, but in our communication out to the public, we asked that anyone that couldn't make the call to provide comments, and that we would read the comments to the board. So I have 2 sets of comments to read, and I'll just read them as we received them. So this is from a Mr. Aaron Kalberg, K-A-A-L-B-E-R-G. To the members of the MDHA board, I live in East Nashville and own a business that operates in 5 Points. I oppose any extension of the 5 Points redevelopment district. Over the last several years, the design guidelines have created more confusion than anything else, as they often conflict with other overlays, e.g. historic, that should and will remain. In contrast, Councilmember Withers' thoughtful rezoning plan will more than adequately replace MDHA's design guidelines and ultimately will strike a better balance among all stakeholders. A redevelopment district that doesn't provide any TIF financing provides no meaningful benefit to the community, and obviously the area is no longer blighted by any definition. MDHA should spend its time and resources in neighborhoods that need it, not in 5 Points. Thank you for considering my opinion. And we also have a letter, a written document from Mr. Jimmy Granberry, Chair and CEO of H.G. Hill Realty Company, to the board. This letter is an expression of my strong support for the proposed rezoning for the 5 Points area of East Nashville, given that the redevelopment district zoning for this area was established in the mid-'80s, and there is an ongoing stream of applications before the Planning Commission for zoning modifications to meet today's standards. It would seem crucial to work through the new base zoning alignments to allow for more intentional designs and layout for current development projects. As a landowner in this area and member of the development community, I believe the zoning change will help to design and build projects that meets the needs of both the existing residents and enhances the surrounding community. And I ask you to approve the proposed zoning change. This does not address, as an example, though, the extension of the district. And Board Chair, that's all the comments we've received. We did reach out in multiple ways to gather as much input as possible. The last to speak will be Councilman Withers, if that's okay.
I think so. I do think that the committee's had a letter from all of the neighborhoods. Has that been introduced formally into this full board meeting, Jim?
It's included in the board packets.
You might want. I think you should. I think so. It was comment received. You should read it.
Okay. So this was received on September 16th, addressed to me and the board chair from the Mr. Michael Oliver, president of the Historic East End, Mr. Nathan Oliver, Laughlin Springs president, and Ms. Lois Lane, the president of Historic Edgefield. We hope this letter finds you all safe during these unprecedented times. The neighborhood associations of Historic East End, Historic Edgefield, and Laughlin Springs are requesting that the expiration deadline for the MDHA 5 Points redevelopment overlay design guidelines be extended for 5 years until December 31st, 2025. We make this request to allow the neighborhoods to continue to have a voice in shaping the inevitable redevelopment of our environment as we recover from the most recent tornado that occurred on March 3rd, 2020. The proposed deadline extension for the 5 Points overlay will place it on a parallel track with the companion MDHA East Bank redevelopment overlay design guidelines, which is territorially adjacent to the 5 Points overlay and covers East Nashville's continued development along Woodland Street and Main Street, all the way from the Cumberland River to 5 Points. Both of these overlays will work together to continue to define a vision for those boundaries as the area recovers from the March 3rd tornado. Conversations about extending the expiration date for the MDHA 5 Points redevelopment overlay design guidelines have been an ongoing informal dialogue for a number of years between the neighborhood leadership, MDHA staff, and our own council persons, recognizing that it would expire at the end of the year 2020. This overlay document represents the outcome of thousands of combined hours of community meetings, documented input, and work from community consultants and stakeholders in East Nashville to create a tool that represents the best path forward for our community's built environment as it recovered from the negligence of the 60s and 70s, followed by the recovery and building after the tornado of 1998. Over the course of its existence, the 5 Points overlay has been updated 3 times through similar public processes in 1991, 2005, and 2015. Our current council person, recognizing how important these community development guidelines are to the success and continuity of our neighborhood's vision, as recently as 2019, asked the Metro Planning Department to adopt these guidelines as part of a UDO. East Nashville wants and needs these guidelines in place to provide a consistent voice and a baseline to help regulate the development to come in the next 5 years. Without these guidelines, our neighborhoods could be inundated with specific zoning proposals and zoning appeals without the resource of time to participate as we help pick up the pieces of our own homes and neighbors. We are not asking MDHA to extend or create any additional TIF funding unless they see fit. We are only asking that the design protections remain in place until we as a community are able to find another vehicle through metro planning or zoning to guide future development that meets the expectations for our neighborhoods as this policy already does. Please extend the deadline for the MDHA 5 points redevelopment overlay design guidelines until December 31st, 2025, signed by the 3 principals, Mr. Oliver, and Ms. Lane.
Councilman Withers.
I think that's all the data points there.
Well, again, appreciate the committee for your time. I enjoyed speaking with you just a couple of days ago and coming back today. What I will say is that as the District 6 council member, I oppose extensions of the redevelopment district. I do not support that action. I have stated to the neighborhood groups that I do not support it and will not support it in council. I will not introduce that legislation. If that is introduced at the council, I perceive that it will have a very difficult time passing at the council. It will get deferred, if not by me, then by other council members. It is going to raise more questions than answers. And furthermore, it is going to create confusion at exactly the same time that we have a rezoning plan that I worked diligently on with the consultation of MDHA staff. It was an MDHA staff recommendation, it was a planning department staff recommendation, a historic zoning commission staff recommendation, a codes department recommendation. A year ago, staff stated to me that this district would not qualify for extension and that I needed to find another plan. As the neighborhood letter stated, I did go to the planning department and ask about a UDO. And the planning department said, no, we will not do a UDO. What we recommend is that you look at base zonings that are now available in Nashville Next that accomplish most of what the design guidelines do. And that then if the neighborhoods come back with additional feedback for specific things that they worry would be lost with base zoning, that they should let us know what those are. Those discussions have gone on generally as a concept for a year. They specifically have gone on after the tornado. I've repeatedly reached out to the neighborhoods to say, please circle for me the portions of this text that you are worried about losing. And despite repeatedly asking for that, the neighborhoods have not given myself or the Metro Department staff any constructive, specific items that they wanted to work on. They have not. It grieves me that they have not. But what I have done is that knowing that there is a December 31st deadline, I've taken it very seriously. I could have just said, you know what, we're done. I could have done that. But instead, I've worked with MDHA staff, planning staff, historic staff, code staff. I have reached out to the author of the design guidelines, Hunter G. I have reached out to many of the largest property owners, not everyone, because there's a lot, but you see a letter from Mr. Jimmy Granberry for HG Hill. That's one of the few exposed parcels. He is on board with the rezoning plan. I have been diligent. I have put together community meetings, begged staff, can you please give me your Monday evening or Tuesday evening to sit in for a meeting for an hour and a half, where we're going to listen to community members and neighborhood groups who provided no specific constructive feedback about what they were looking to achieve. They didn't. And so what I have to work on is the deadline that I have and the staff recommendation from 4 departments whose job it is to do what the neighborhood wants, right? The 4 departments are saying, like, this is how we think we get all of our 4 departments on the same page instead of conflicted. And that's better for the staff at the 4 departments. That's better for the property owners. That's better for the neighbors. That's the consensus view of each of these departments. That is actually the consensus view, because I also reached out, I'm like, are there people that we might be worried about? So that's the consensus view of land use attorneys in town that sometimes have waded into this redevelopment district. And you know what the land use attorney said? Do you remember, council member, in 2015 when your predecessor did the last update and we went to the Metro Council and we overturned the ruling of the vice mayor and got a parcel rezoned to have the will that we wanted? Do you know how we did that? Because there was ambiguity. So this document produces ambiguity that in and of itself is bad for the neighborhoods. And getting rid of it is actually the recommendation of those land use attorneys. Like, you want to shut that down? Close this document down. That's from those people. That's their advice. That's their professional advice as land use attorneys. So this document does not help the neighborhoods in any meaningful way. If anything, it provides additional exposure to the neighborhoods for some folks to know how to work some magic. In the last 10 years, I have not seen anything that the neighborhoods were concerned about stopping that this document helped them to stop. In fact, what I have seen is I've seen buildings that were in, let's say, the residential subdistrict and the conservation overlay that the neighborhoods opposed, but that still got approved by this board as well as the Historic Zoning Commission board. I've seen neighbors complain about buildings on Main Street that they're like, how on earth did the design review committee approve that? Because it looks like crap. And the reason is, like, if you're relying on those same people, like, why are you doing this effort to extend a document and a board that you don't trust? And that's what you heard today. The neighborhoods are disappointed. They said that they don't feel like staff is being diligent enough. So then why are you then going to say, we want the same staff to keep doing this work that we don't feel like we can rely on? That makes no sense, ladies and gentlemen. So I oppose an extension of this document because I think, for me as a council member, I'm on the hook for whatever the zoning piece is, right? But you as a body are then going to have to go to the public and say, we think that this neighborhood deserves special treatment that's not available to other neighbors that's outside of our scope. That's a problem for MDHA. Politically, culturally, at the moment that Nashville's in, when you have a document that our staff analysis has said has caused property values to increase by something like 720% versus the rest of the county at about 240. This document, in the parlance of today's generation, which is younger than myself, this document and this effort is itself suspect as promoting gentrification. There's nothing in this plan that talks about affordable housing. There's nothing in this plan that talks about that today. It was used for that a long time ago, and that was great. But this document needs to go ahead and expire. I will oppose any extension of it. I will, not only will I not introduce it at council, I will oppose it at council because I have done the work that this staff and the planning department staff and the code staff and the historic staff have recommended. I have done that work. Now, we can have conversations among the neighborhoods, and even most of the neighborhoods, when they've had the community meetings, like, well, we're not opposed to the rezoning. Well, then what's the problem, ladies and gentlemen? Like, I need the neighborhoods to get on board with the rezoning, because that is the solution that all four departments agree on, that even the land use attorneys that people sometimes are afraid of agree on. I need everyone to get on board with that document that is going to have public hearings on November the 12th and December the 1st, right? So postcard mailings went out to everybody because no one can ever attend all the meetings, right? So like everyone in East Nashville got a postcard notice, right? So I've got that going. Out of my personal pocket, I mailed a packet of information to every affected property owner for the commercial property. That includes a cover letter, it includes a before and after zoning map, and then it provides the land use tables so that they can compare and contrast what their land use entitlements would be before and after if the proposals are accepted. And I asked them to please get back to me by October the 30th. I did it on my pocket, but it's in the mail to them. If they have concerns, I welcome those concerns so that we can have a conversation about it. What I would ask that this board to do is, rather than have two bills going before the Metro Council that say opposite things, because that's the way it would be perceived. It's not the way it is. I know that the idea is that you would do an extension contingent on the rezone. But if you put even an open-ended date on the rezone, we would just keep arguing about it, right? So let's get everyone on board with making sure that what comes before the planning commission and the council in a couple of weeks, a couple of months really, let's make sure that that passes. If the neighborhoods themselves are like, we are largely on board with that, then don't put a conflicting document on that says we're going to keep talking about it, maybe for as long as 5 years just because. Like, let's get the rezoning piece done so that your MDHA staff can get back to the work that they need to be doing and that is within your mission. So what I would ask this body to do, in the spirit of Mayor Purcell's compromise resolution, is not to go before the council and extend a redevelopment district. What I would recommend that this body do instead is say, our staff recommendation for a year has been that this area doesn't qualify for extension, and that instead he should seek a base zone change. And we encourage the Planning Commission and the Metro Council to approve a base zone plan. I don't want to tie you to like where the dial is on each parcel, but I think that if this board said it is important that we lock in some of these aspects of the design guidelines, it's important that get locked in. So we encourage the Planning Commission and the council to adopt something at these meetings, even if it means that there are some parcels that are really contentious and if the neighbors don't care, we can cut them out. There are only a handful of parcels that are going to be exposed in any way, shape, or form. I've got a letter here from that major property owner in favor of the zone change, right? East End Lofts isn't going anywhere. 901 Woodland isn't going anywhere. Basement East is rebuilding. We're talking about a handful of parcels and you're going to extend a redevelopment district for this purpose, which is outside of the scope? I think that's crazy, ladies and gentlemen. It's well-intentioned, but it's crazy to do that when the guidance from your own staff for a year has been, Councilman, you need to find another plan. And this has been talked over with the neighbors. The neighbors aren't saying that they're opposed to it. The property owners aren't saying they're opposed to it. It's just that we want to hang on to this document because a bunch of us worked on it 20 years ago, which is great. But just like a community plan, you update it. I was here for the 2006 East Nashville Community Plan. We updated it in 2015 through Nashville Next. They were both great documents. This is like the Nashville Next update doesn't negate the 2006 Community Plan. It sort of really copies it. And that's what this does. This says we're going to line up the base zoning districts that give you almost everything that is in the redevelopment district guidelines anyway. The only constructive thing that I've heard that so far out of all my numerous conversations, even since the tornado, is like, well, the requirements about glazing aren't exactly identical. So we're going to take this bold of a step and create this much confusion for property owners over the placement of a window? That's crazy. And I love everyone to death, but I need everyone to take this deadline as seriously as I do and get on board and help me get this passed so that I can help you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Council Member. I think we know how you feel. Is there any question or comment from members of the board?
I want to thank everyone who came out and participated and shared their opinions with us today. I want to make sure that I am understanding this properly, which relates to the whole reason why we do redevelopment plans in the first place. And my understanding is that we do a redevelopment plan in order to be ensuring that tax increment financing is utilized in the best use possible and meeting what the community envisions is needed to address blight and improve the community. In light of, if that is in fact accurate, in light of the fact that TIF is no longer extended and available in this district, continuing with a redevelopment plan that is effectively tied to TIF funding and is 30 years old, it makes me feel that this is beyond the purview of our job as MDHA, because we are really not using a redevelopment plan or extending it for any function of TIF.
So I'll let the staff address that, but I will say as your chair that I actually don't have that understanding of redevelopment districts. TIF is just one piece, one tool that follows, but the redevelopment process. And it may be that we went through this a bit earlier in the year, but it may be valuable to revisit it. Really goes way before that, and it is the notion of both redevelopment and as well as the elimination of blight within neighborhoods, and then the preservation of neighborhoods and the prevention of the return of blight is all a part of the federal, state, and local schemes that have been established. Within that, the possibility of tax increment financing, pilots, other kinds of things, including the design guidelines that Mr. Withers, the Councilmember Withers, talked about. All those things are additional, but the central notion is the agency has both a responsibility and then ultimately the opportunity to be involved in the conditions within the neighborhood. Mr. Murphy, you actually have been doing this longer than anyone else on this call. You might want to address that.
I think that's a pretty accurate summary of the overall scope of the redevelopment plan. Obviously, 30 years ago, the MDHA board adopted a redevelopment plan that was approved by the council that contemplated a plan for the overall redevelopment of the properties to eliminate blight, basically, to preserve property values and provide for improvements in infrastructure. And as Mayor Purcell mentioned, TIF is just one tool for that. Again, part of what the task at this point is determining whether that plan has accomplished that purpose or whether there's further work that needs to be done. And I think that's the decision that's before the board now. And what we're talking about here are the land use restrictions component of the plan. And those land use restrictions are designed to make sure that the property develops consistent with the plan. So again, the real question is the plan still needed at this point, or have conditions changed such that now you don't need a plan anymore to achieve the things that the plan was needed to do back in 30 years ago? And I think that really is the question before you today is, do we still need this plan, or has it lived its life and is no longer needed for the neighborhood to be able to accomplish the things that the plan was trying to drive 30 years ago, but might have driven to the point now where it's no longer needed? And that's your decision.
This is Paulette Coleman. For the representatives of the associations, is there any blight that you can define beyond the properties that were damaged by the March 3rd tornado?
Mr. Kane.
We did not, the damage that we noted was through the tornado. There may be a very small, and I mean small, handful of properties that would be blighted otherwise, but we're talking about probably less than half a dozen properties at the most.
As Mr. Paulette, Mr. Coleman.
Yeah, the next question is, there was reference to a gap if the development district was not extended, and I didn't quite understand the point that was implicit in that question.
Well, I'll let Mr. Murphy address it, but I believe it is the notion that there is a zoning proposal before the Metro Council, which could very well be signed into law by January the 1st. And Councilman Withers, I believe, is moving aggressively to pass that on the December 15 meeting of the Metro Council, and within 2 weeks, it would be expected the mayor would sign it. I think that to say it quickly, the notion is if for any reason that was delayed or deferred, then the protections of his overall land use transformation would not be available when the window opened with the end of the redevelopment district. And as Mr. Murphy has said, I think carefully, and you heard from the opponents, there are a number of restrictions over these properties which will disappear. on the 31st of December unless they are replaced in some other way, as Councilman Withers is working to do. That's the window that could be created if for any reason the rezoning was delayed. Is that, Mr. Murphy, comfortable with that?
I think that's correct. I think there also was a comment that some of the properties are not under a historic overlay, or some of them are under a conservation overlay, so they're differing standards for some of the properties, and the redevelopment plan provides, I guess, a more uniform standard across the whole redevelopment district. But again, those are somewhat property specific, but as Mayor Purcell pointed out, the major concern is what happens if this plan expires and the rezoning does not pass. And I think that's, again, another question that you as board members should look at.
Other questions? Commissioner Ansari.
So I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around this, is that, 30 years ago, many of the people who are probably writing in, and I'm probably making a guess or an assumption, probably weren't living in East Nashville 30 years ago. The majority of them were not living in East Nashville 30 years ago. So the blighted conditions that if you look at by values of property, the blighted conditions that have been remedied, if you look at property values, they certainly suggest blight has been remedied. And I think if you go through the community, and I am a property owner in East Nashville as well, as I look around, blight does not appear apparent, menacing, and nearby in that area. So I think I try to go back to your point, Mr. Murphy says, is the plan still needed to eliminate blight? Right, that is the question. And in my mind, I can't demonstrate that. What I feel and what I sense is that there's a level of NIMBYism that is beginning to occur in this neighborhood, is that now we have moved in the neighborhood, the blight and the causes of blight, they are now eliminated. This place has been created now, and now we're saying what we want to do is to protect what we have at this very moment in time. And I'm not saying it's a bad, but the comments are not about blight. The comments aren't about, well, if something were to occur, if there were a gap, what's going to happen is a strip club is going to move in because there's a gap. If that's what you think is blight, I'm not suggesting strip clubs are blight, but I think many people, some others may think that. Or if we were to do this, vape shops or CBD dispensaries, I don't know, pick whatever things you want to pick, that may be an indication of blight. I get the sense that people that it's really about, we're afraid of the unknown and is not focused on blight. So how do we, is there a frame of reference to make the determination as it relates to blight and the remedy of blight? Because I feel like any conversation around, well, there'll be a gap in zoning where people can build this building, then we may not want them to be the building, was not, it misses the core point and it misses the core question, and it begins to feel more like NIMBYism as opposed to the purposes as Mr. Murphy has described them.
Mr. Murphy.
Yeah, so as a redevelopment plan ages over its life, you hope that the plan being successful has eliminated blighting conditions because of the efforts that were made during the bulk of the term of the plan. And so saying that it's eliminated blight is an evidence that to a large extent the plan has been successful. The question for you today is whether that success is complete or whether there's still more work to be done that would be helped by continuing these restrictions for a period of time. And that really, there's no guidance in the statutes and in the law on what is the relevant criteria to look at that. But I do think part of it is a question of do you feel that based on what you've heard from staff and from the neighborhood that this plan has accomplished its purpose, or there's more work to be done for it to accomplish its purpose. And I think as a board member, that's your determination. Do you need more time to accomplish its purpose? Or if you let the plan expire, will the neighborhood be doing okay and not have the risk of significant backsliding into the conditions that were present back when the plan was first adopted? That's a hard call, but I think that's what you're trying to evaluate at this point, is whether or not you need this plan to extend, whether that's 1 year or 5 years or whatever. That's your call as to whether or not you think the plan has accomplished its purpose or there's more work to be done.
You can think about that in the context of the downtown, for example. Your largest redevelopment district in terms of property valuation is downtown Nashville. And you would see many comparable districts around America that there was a different condition at the foot of the Capitol at the time of redevelopment district number 1, which was 1953, I think. On the other hand, would you want to remove the redevelopment district or not? And there's as Mr. Murphy said, I think, and obviously, as the testimony here makes clear, there are different opinions, especially for those who would like to do something in a space that is either not allowed by the redevelopment district or is unclear as to its capacity to be done under the redevelopment district. But this basic notion that what's in front of us is an explicit finding of blight in the way you think of it. That's not, I think Mr. Murphy makes clear, not what's in front of us here, or downtown, or in Germantown, or in Salem Town, or any of the places that where the redevelopment districts exist at this time. That's no longer. We're past that determination. That said, are there any other comments or questions for Mr. Murphy or the staff?
This is Kay Bowers, Commissioner Bowers. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I want to thank Councilman Withers, and I want to thank Joe Kane and staff for all their extensive work on this issue. And as I've driven through East Nashville and thought about everything that folks have said, at the end of the day, I still arrive back at the conclusion that I agree with Councilman Withers that I think this district has served its purpose, and I think it's time for it to retire and for us to focus on other parts of town where there's such need. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comment?
Thank you, Kay. I just want to say I agree with Kay's point, and I really took to heart the council members' efforts. I mean, I feel that the right efforts are going in to actually move beyond what you need and what we are typically doing in a redevelopment plan, and actually, making sure that that's being crystallized in zoning and UDOs and everything else that can be used in terms of tools in the toolbox. And I also want to acknowledge that I certainly understand the vulnerability that the tornado has left residents of East Nashville feeling. However, when I have stepped back, and I live in East Nashville, not within this area, but when I've stepped back and looked at it, to Mr. Murphy's point, I do not have a concern for backsliding. And so thank you for the conversation. I just wanted to share.
All right. Well, thank you. Any other member of the commission that wishes to ask a question or make a comment? I would say, based upon the chair's assessment of the commissioners who have spoken, that there may not be a motion. Is there a motion? Discussion is complete. Is there a motion? There being no motion, that will conclude this discussion. There is therefore no action before the Board of Commissioners of the Metropolitan Development and Housing Agency. There being no action at this meeting probably, although not absolutely, means that there will not be action at a future meeting that could be concluded prior to the expiration of the district. The district then, as I understand it, and the minutes can reflect, will expire on December the 31st of this year. And the good news is that you will have an opportunity in January on January 1st, but the first 2 weeks of January, you'll be able to see very quickly. The first month, let's say, you'll get to see what happens. That concludes that section. Thank you, Councilman Withers, very much. I think that we cannot take action unless there's a motion, and there's not, to make a recommendation, but I think you know now that the board certainly has taken no position that is antithetical to your efforts to make the change and bring the cooperation and the collaboration that you seek, and with your support and encouragement, and may I say, even through a mask passion for protecting your constituents and the neighborhoods. I'm going to be very both hopeful, and my prayer is that you are successful in protecting those neighbors. And you know, of course, I live there too. Thank you very, very much. We're now, I notice, about 20 minutes over the period time scheduled. Mr. Murphy, again, you particularly thanks for coming in the middle of the day. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. I'm glad to.
Anything else that we should do, Mr. Murphy? This is your expertise. Have we?
No, I think with no action, the plan will expire at the end of the year. And so it would take an affirmative act by this board to cause that to change. With no action being taken by the end of the year, and again, you mentioned the possibility. I mean, you could always have special meetings or whatever if there was a change in interest from the board. But barring anything like that, the plan will expire per its terms at the end of the year.
All right, well, I hope that those listening understand all of that. I think that they should, and they will. But there was no motion. There was no support for an extension within the board. And as a result, no action is taken for that purpose. Jim, you have your report, review of the retreat matters and information requests. Let me looking at the agenda. I don't think we're going to be able to do the item 9 demonstration. Can you very quickly take us through both your report, perhaps submitted in writing to us if you have it that way, and then the item 10, would that meet the needs of the board? Would that suit the board? And my plan would be to conclude in the next few minutes, unless there is a desire by the board to do more.
I can cover all this in a written summary. Just some positives. Our oldest resident, Ms. Lula Waters, had her 108th birthday in September, and we gave her a nice set of flowers, and I want to sing happy birthday to her. Can you tee up the, I'm just going to play the ULI. We've won another great set of awards. We'll play those awards. Everything else, we can wait until next month. And so just want to go out on a high note. How many minutes is this?
2 minutes.
This is 2 minutes. So that we can
Our first category of awarded projects will be large public sector projects. The first awarded large public sector project is Kirkpatrick Park.
Kirkpatrick Park, fantastic and unique development whose greatest feature is a long-term plan, a strategic plan to remediate concentrated poverty by building new workforce and new market rate units in an integrated society. It's called Envision Casey. Kirkpatrick is our first step for what brings the community together of different incomes. Schools. Everyone wants their child to go to a great school. And in this case, there's a remarkable development just down the street called the Explore School. That's part of our vision of how we put together different incomes so that now people of low income, workforce, and market rate, their children walk to school together at a beautiful new charter school.
They were so thoughtful from the standpoint of how the buildings are maintained. The residents have principles of universal design and providing access to disabled visitors to that first floor entrance of the unit. And I think it was remarkable that they took time to study architecture that is vernacular residential, but yeah, give it a little bit of a spin to make it more interesting.
One of the things that I hope folks in Nashville really appreciate is that it's fairly rare to have a body like MDHA who is as creative and aggressive about expanding their portfolio of affordable housing in a responsible way that builds communities. You're already starting to see the catalytic effects of just this first phase right now in terms of the development that it encourages and inspires around it. And I was really excited to see that they're already starting to reap some of the benefits of being thoughtful about the design and executing in a way that I fully expect that as we go back to that neighborhood, we'll find it moving in a direction that is certainly more development, but also still inclusive, because they're still finding a way to keep the people who live there as well. And I think projects like this have to be recognized if we're going to be serious about advancing them in the future.
So with that, we won 2 awards. We won the People's Choice Award and the large project award. We have a long road ahead. We had a lot of thoughtful discussion today. I look forward to hearing more about it, and that's my report.
Well, thank you, Mr. Harbison. Just to be very clear, there is nothing currently that is that you feel the board has to know today or needs to know today that's a matter of public safety, public health, or public well-being within our residents.
No.
And on item 10, thank you. On item 10, overview of evictions in the CDC order. The CDC order remains in place for, as far as we know, at least as long as the 5 Points redevelopment district, and there are no evictions that are under consideration other than those you have previously described, which revolve around public safety or criminality.
No, for clarity, if you please read the write-up, we are processing for those economic potential evictions. We are not going to evict. So we're doing the paperwork, we're doing the coordination, we're trying to get workout plans to get residents to respond. And most of our residents have on an ongoing basis, but we're not evicting anyone, not putting anyone out of apartment in 2020. So we are actually processing those, contacting residents, waiting for the court process, but we're not going to evict anyone. So we are doing some of that for economic work as well.
Any questions from members of the board?
This is a comment from Paulette Coleman. One of our partners that helps us with tenant disputes, the National Conflict Resolution Center, has been awarded a $500,000 grant to work with landlords and tenants to prevent evictions and also to offer some pay for the landlords. And I was just wondering, since they are already a partner, are we working with them on anything related to evictions? Because this just happened recently.
Yes, and Sarah and I talked pretty frequently. We have time here, we want to go through it, but we work with the Center for Conflict Resolution very closely, and they assist us frequently. So they're intimately involved in what we're doing. But Will Biggs, if you got a second, you want to comment on what Sarah and everybody does with us? I got one on.
Is that not a grant that that they receive through us?
I'd have to check on that. We established a partnership with them some time ago, probably 3 years ago, to bring them in to mediate conflict and to assist with economic evictions and to reduce them. I don't know how much, they may have won a CDBG grant. I just don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay.
I don't.
In the press release, there was no mention of MDHA.
No, I think that was Metro CARES Act fund.
You're correct, Kay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, Mr. Biggs. Well, Paulette, we don't seem to have him on the line. Can we have a follow-up report to you on that?
Sure, no problem. I just found out last night, and I just wanted to make sure. I guess the other question I have is, since we're not doing evictions, why are we going through the paperwork and causing people the stress? It doesn't make
because they owe us money, and they have to ask their leasing assistant to do a workout remediation and reduce their rents. Not everyone responds to the leasing assistant, And after a period of time, we start the process, and then they start to come in and work with us to do a rent reduction.
Oh, okay.
To be clear about it, Jim, if I understand correctly, a person falls behind in their rent, we don't take them to court as the first resort. The court action is only in those cases where people are not responding. We can't contact them. Does not appear to be any other way we can work through it. And so the court is the last resort to focus the attention of the resident on the obligation.
Absolutely. We're in the tenancy residency business, not in the eviction business. We want them to stay. And we've done a lot of rent reductions. And that was what we're going to talk about today is the very large number of leasing assistant on our staff's work with residents to reduce their rents as they've lost income, which has been a really big staff effort in the last 6 months.
Commissioner Coleman, may we move on? Are you comfortable?
Oh, yes, I'm fine.
Good. Any other questions, concerns, any old business, any new business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
That we adjourn.
I'll give it to Commissioner Coleman and the second to Commissioner Ansari, but there was a great enthusiasm among all members present and visible to me about this. Let me thank, as always, our executive director, their entire staff. Councilman Withers, I think, has left the room, but you were very good oh, he's still there. Good. Councilman Withers, good. And I appreciate you all very much, and I'll see you soon. Take care. We're adjourned.
Good.